According to Operation World 2006 edition, there are 726 spoken languages on the more than 4,000 inhabited islands of the nation of Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is south of China, so this would be China, and then India would be over here, and then Indonesia's down here. Island nation. Okay. So one person would be speaking Sudanese, another Malay, and another Marathi, all in the same city. How are they supposed to understand each other? Well, I would like to tell you today about the history of the solution to this perplexing problem, namely the development of the Indonesian language. First, I will describe the language called Malay. Second, I will briefly describe the history and importance of the 1928 Youth Conference. Lastly, I will describe the development of the language as Indonesia moved into the modern world. First, the rise of the Malay trade language. The Malay were fishermen on the coast of these Indonesian and Malaysian islands, and they traded their goods, and they also traded their language, so that Malay became a widely used vehicle for communication. It became the lingua franca of diverse tribes, speaking all these 726 languages, but it didn't reach them all. Not yet. So then the Dutch came in, and in 1602 to colonialize Malaysia and Indonesia and set up a big business and set up their government to take all their resources. And they actually encouraged the use of Malay among many more peoples because they needed to use it for their communication with them. Well, in 1928, the youth rose up against the Dutch with this cry: "One nation, one country, one language." The youth were tired of the Dutch rule, and they used Malay to spread their message. They realized that the islands would never be united without a common language. So many people were already knew Malay, so it was a logical choice for their one language part of their cry. Well, in 1945, Indonesia gained its independence, and it renamed Malay Bahasa Indonesia, which means the language of Indonesia, and they set it in their formal constitution. This sparked the rise of formal language planning, and what that is a committee get together and they decide what is good Indonesian and what is not good Indonesian, what they're going to reject. But the local people didn't care, so they adopted whatever they wanted to do with their language. And so this is what linguists call diglossia. It's where there's a formal language and a non-formal language. So when I was in Indonesia, I was told to refer to myself as saya, which is the formal version. But after a while, I noticed that my Indonesian translator friends were referring to themselves as aku, and I eventually figured out that aku was the informal version of the I. So yeah, that happened. And as happens in most languages, Indonesia has borrowed some words. For example, not originally having apples on the islands, with the introduction of the fruit, Indonesians adopted the name also, and they spelled it apel, A-P-E-L. In conclusion, Indonesia, like many languages, has a long history from simple beginnings to international use. In an island nation with over 700 languages, Indonesian is a proudly accepted unifier of the peoples. This makes communication possible. How did this happen? Starting from the inter-island Malay trade, it became a widely used trade language. Then, the 1928 Youth Conference made it part of their rally cry of one nation, one country, one language. And it has continued to develop ever since, especially once it was set in stone in the 1945 Constitution of Indonesia. Millions of Indonesians have yet to hear or speak this language, but as the many tribes are introduced to the 21st century, their children will quickly learn to speak this ever-evolving language, Bahasa Indonesia.